September 15, 1940, 5:37 hours, Chain Home Station, Dover, England. The wind off the channel was sharp and cold, carrying the faint salt smell of the sea. On a lonely cliff above the grey waters, 4 massive steel towers loomed against the dawn, skeletal giants standing guard over Britain's southern coast. Their humming wires and metal arms stretched toward the sky like sentinels waiting for something invisible. Inside the operations hut below, a low rhythmic hum filled the cramped room. Consoles glowed with faint green light. The faint crackle of static hissed through the headphones of 20-year-old aircraftwoman Margaret Peg Williams. Her fingers poised over the plotting table. Her eyes, tired but sharp, flicked from the oscillating cathode ray tube in front of her to the map laid out under the warm red lamps. She saw it, the faintest pulse. A ripple, then another. Contact, she whispered, almost to herself. Bearing 155, range 80 miles. Across the room, Sergeant Peter Collins, the duty controller, leaned over her shoulder. He squinted at the screen, a glowing arc sweeping clockwise, leaving behind brief, flickering dots. He didn't hesitate. He turned to the wall phone. Plot to group, Chain Home Dover, raid forming over Calais. Estimate, he glanced back to Peg. 80 plus, altitude 10,000, closing fast. The calm voice of Group Controller Squadron Leader David Scrivener crackled through from Uxbridge headquarters. Copy that, Dover, stand by, we'll scramble Biggin Hill and Hornchurch. Keep tracking. The message raced across Britain's early warning network, a web of wires and voices linking the coast to the airfields of the Royal Air Force. Outside, the wind carried the faint distant drone of engines, not British. Not friendly. Peg's heart quickened, it had begun again. At that same hour, across the channel in occupied France, Hauptmann Karl Fischer of Jagdgeschwader 26 checked his watch as he climbed into his Messerschmitt Bf 109E. Dawn's first light reflected off the line of silver bombers, Heinkel He 111s of Kampfgeschwader 53, forming up for the day's raid. Their target, London, again. They'd been told the RAF was nearly beaten, that the island fortress could hold for only a few more weeks. But Fischer had seen otherwise. The British fighters always seemed to know where they were coming from. Always waiting in the clouds. How do they do it? His wingman muttered, tightening his oxygen mask. Fischer didn't answer. He didn't know. Below them, waves rolled toward the white cliffs of Dover. Back on the cliffside, Peg and Collins tracked the swarm as it crossed the channel. The radar returns grew stronger, merging into a wide glowing smear. The entire hut seemed to hold its breath. Confirming course 280. Peg said, that's London again. Scrivener's voice came through once more. Understood. Scramble all available squadrons. Within minutes, the call went out to Biggin Hill, Kenley, and North Weald. Sirens blared. Pilots ran. At Biggin Hill, Squadron Leader Brian Kinkham climbed into his Spitfire MKE, the Merlin engine growling to life beneath him. The propeller blurred, and exhaust fumes filled the air. Ground crews pulled away chocks. Blue section, airborne immediately, he shouted through the radio. As the Spitfires roared skyward, radar operators on the coast continued to feed updates, position, height, bearing. Every blip was a warning. Every echo a heartbeat of Britain's defense. No one outside these huts would ever see the faces of the radar girls or the controllers. Yet they were the unseen eyes of the island. And this morning, their work would decide whether London still stood by nightfall. The Chain Home system, crude, vast, and secret, had just tilted the balance of the Battle of Britain. September 15, 1940, 6:05 hours, Fighter Command Headquarters, Bentley Priory, North London. Inside a grand mansion converted for war, the heart of Britain's air defence pulsed with urgency. The filter room, a cathedral of concentration, was lit by the amber glow of wall-sized maps. Dozens of WAAF, Women's Auxiliary Air Force, plotters moved wooden markers across a vast table, representing squadrons and raids in real time. From above, on a raised dais, Air Vice Marshal Keith Park, commander of No. 11 Group, watched intently. His face, drawn and pale, betrayed the exhaustion of too many nights like this. He knew what the lights on the map meant: lives, fuel, hope. Behind him, Air Chief Marshal Sir Hugh Dowding, the commander of Fighter Command, stood quietly, hands clasped behind his back. His eyes followed the coloured markers advancing from the southeast. Their main thrust, Park said softly, is coming through Dover again. Dowding nodded. Chain Home shows them forming earlier this time. We've gained an hour's notice. That was the miracle, the unseen advantage. Before radar, warnings came from coastal observers straining their eyes toward the channel. Now, Britain could see beyond the horizon, into the unseen. A young WAAF officer relayed the next report. Raid approaching London at 12.000 feet. Strength over 100 aircraft. Park exhaled through his nose. Right then, we'll throw the lot at them. He turned to the operations officer. Scramble Kenley and Biggin Hill. Hold Tangmere in reserve. The order rippled through the network. Telephones clattered. Radios crackled. The map table became a living organism, markers shifting, hands darting, chalk notes appearing and vanishing in seconds. It was war conducted not by guns or tanks, but by information. 6:20 hours. Above the Thames estuary. The first formation of Spitfires from 92 Squadron broke through a layer of low cloud. Sunlight flashed on their wings, revealing the black and white invasion stripes hastily painted days before. Below them, the silver glint of bombers appeared like scales on a moving serpent. Contact, 11 o'clock low, shouted Flight Lieutenant Alan Wright. The voice of Kinkham came through the radio. All sections. Break and engage. Hit the bombers before they reach London. Engines screamed as the formation split apart. From his cockpit, Wright caught a glimpse of London in the distance, the sprawl of rooftops and the glimmer of the Thames. He clenched his jaw. Not today, not again. He pushed the stick forward. The Merlin roared. A burst of traces streaked past his canopy. He rolled sharply, spotting a Messerschmitt diving from the sun. Bloody hell, he hissed. The dogfight had begun. Far below, in a dim bunker at Uxbridge, the radar plot still pulsed with movement. Peg Williams' voice came over the line from Dover, primary raid dispersing. Heading north, multiple smaller groups detected, possibly fighter escorts breaking off. Scrivener replied, "Good work, Dover, keep tracking, we'll adjust intercepts accordingly." He turned to his aide. "They're trying to flank us this time, come in from the east while we're busy over London." Dowding's voice came coolly from behind, "Then let them. Every mile they fly costs them fuel. Every minute, we have radar watching." It wasn't bravado, it was calculation. The Luftwaffe had to cross the channel, fight, and return. The RAF only had to hold them long enough to make the cost unbearable. Across the channel, Hauptmann Fischer's bomber shuddered as flak burst around them, black puffs of smoke at 20.000 feet. He looked down through the glass nose of the Heinkel and saw the grey expanse of water giving way to English countryside. Enemy fighters ahead, the rear gunner shouted. And there they were, the dark silhouettes of Spitfires diving out of the sun. The German formation broke apart in panic. Radios crackled with shouted call signs and curses. "Wo kommen Sie her? Where did they come from?" Fischer barked. But deep inside, he already knew the truth. They always knew. 6:37 hours. Chain home station, Dover. Peg adjusted the dials on her console, her hands trembling slightly. The blips moved rapidly now, too many to count. The radar was alive with chaos. "Ma'am," Collins said, his voice low, "they're scattering." Peg looked at him, eyes wide. "That's good, isn't it?" He nodded, half smiling. "It means the boys found them." Outside, the hum of the radar towers mixed with the distant thunder of engines high above the clouds. No one in the hut saw the dogfights raging across the sky, but every sweep of the radar told the story. And as the echoes danced across her screen, Peg realized something that few outside this room ever would. This, the hum, the static, the flickering lights, was Britain's real front line. The line that no bomb could destroy. September 15, 1940, 7:12 hours, 15.000 feet above London. The morning sky was chaos, streaks of vapor trails tangled like chalk lines scrawled across a blue canvas. Sunlight glinted off silver fuselages as Spitfires and Hurricanes twisted through the air. Each movement a desperate duel measured in seconds. Flight Lieutenant Alan Wright could smell the hot metal of his guns. The acrid tang of cordite filling his cockpit. He yanked his Spitfire into a climbing roll, pulling G's that pressed his body into the seat. The world spun, sky, cloud, enemy. A Heinkel He-111 lumbered across his gun sight, its starboard engine trailing black smoke. Wright steadied, squeezed the trigger. 6.303 Browning machine guns barked fire. The bomber shuddered, one wing breaking apart in a spray of metal and flame. "Splash one Heinkel," he shouted over the radio, though the words came out half strangled by the G-force. Below him, the burning bomber spiraled earthward, disappearing into the haze above the Thames. "Good shot, Wright," came Kinkham's voice. "Sharp and steady, stay tight, they're still coming." He looked westward, over the rooftops of London. Dozens of dark specks moved in formation, more bombers. Relentless. But they weren't alone, the RAF was there waiting. 7:15 hours, Bentley Priory, Operations Room. Raid 55 now entering the London perimeter. Called one of the WAAF plotters. Sliding the red marker across the board. Fighter status? Asked Park. Biggin Hill engaged. Kenley intercepting. Hornchurch vectoring in now. Dowding stood silent, eyes on the map. He understood what was at stake, not just a city, but the morale of an entire nation. If London fell to fire and terror, Britain's will could crumble. But the radar, this strange, invisible shield, had changed everything. Chain home reporting new contacts forming off Calais, said a signals officer. Another wave incoming. Park nodded grimly, then we'll meet him too. He leaned over the map table, voice calm but sharp. Scramble Northolt, we'll throw 303 Squadron in this time, the Poles are hungry. 7:23 hours, Northolt Airfield, west of London. Engines roared to life as number 303 Polish fighter squadron sprinted to their Hurricanes. Darwash, Darwash, shouted Flight Lieutenant Jan Zumbach, climbing into his cockpit. He didn't wait for orders. He didn't need to. Moments later, the Hurricanes lifted off the tarmac, wheels folding in as they banked east toward the rising smoke of London. In his headset, Zumbach heard the clipped English command through static, 303 Squadron. Vector 085, intercepting bandits over the Thames. He smiled behind his oxygen mask. Copy that, command, we go hunting. 7:30 hours, over the Thames. The sky above London was now alive with traces and smoke. Anti-aircraft guns boomed from the parks below, Hyde Park, Greenwich, Battersea, the city itself joining the fight. Zumbach spotted a formation of Dornier Do-17s, their long glass noses glinting in the sun. He dove straight through them, guns blazing, two bombers broke apart, engines aflame. Beautiful, he roared into the radio. For Poland, and for England. His wingman's laughter crackled back. The Luftwaffe's once disciplined formation dissolved into chaos. German radio traffic became a babble of panic, clipped voices yelling positions. Warnings, please. From his own Heinkel, Hauptmann Karl Fischer could barely hear over the roar of the engines and the pounding of flak. Stay in formation, he shouted. Drop your loads and turn for home. The sky was on fire, puffs of black and orange, streaks of silver, flashes of tracer rounds. He could see the river below, winding through the city like a dark ribbon. And then, sunlight vanished. A Spitfire dropped in front of him, guns blazing. Bullets tore through the cockpit. Glass exploded. Fischer felt a burning sting in his shoulder as the world tilted. He didn't even realize he was falling until the horizon flipped upside down. 7:40 hours, Chain Home Station, Dover. Peg Williams rubbed her temples. Exhausted, the radar screen was crowded with signals, friend and foe intermingled. Raid 55 dispersing, she reported. Contacts heading southeast, retreating toward Calais. The line crackled. Scrivener's voice came back, triumphant. Confirmed across all stations. The Germans are withdrawing. Outstanding work, Dover. Peg leaned back in her chair, exhaling for what felt like the first time in hours. Through the open window, she could hear the faint echo of engines high above, fading away. Think it's over? Collins asked. She looked at the screen, the faint glow of the returning echoes now drifting back toward France. For today, she said quietly, just for today. 8-10 hours, above the channel. The surviving Luftwaffe bombers limped home over the water. Engines coughed and sputtered, formations broken. Morale shattered. Fischer, pale and bleeding, fought to keep his crippled Heinkel level. Below him, the coast of France appeared, salvation. He pressed the radio switch weakly. This was supposed to be easy. He whispered in disbelief. Back in London, the fires were being put out. Streets were scarred, but the city still stood. And in the control rooms and radar huts across the southern coast, weary operators watched their screens clear one by one. The hum of the chain home towers continued, steady and patient, as if waiting for the next wave. None of them knew that this very day, September 15, 1940, would later be called Battle of Britain Day. And it would mark the moment the tide began to turn. September 15, 1940, 9:20 hours. Fighter Command Headquarters, Bentley Priory, North London. The battle map was a mess of markers, red for enemy, blue for friendly, but now, for the first time in weeks, the red was thinning. Raid 55, retreating. Raid 56, same. No new plots forming, reported a WAAF officer, her pencil tapping rhythmically against the edge of the plotting board. Air Vice Marshal Keith Park straightened, exhaustion softening just slightly into relief. Around him, the constant chatter of the filter room slowed, replaced by something else, a hesitant, collective exhale. "Is that it, sir?" one of the young controllers asked quietly. Park glanced at the map, then at the large clock ticking toward 9:30. "For now," he said, "but they'll be back." From the shadowed corner, Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding spoke, his tone low and measured. "They always come back, but next time, we'll be ready before they cross the coast." He turned toward the observation gallery, watching as the WAAF plotters reset their maps, their faces pale but determined. He knew what few outside these walls did. Britain's survival wasn't resting on numbers, or even courage alone. It rested on something invisible, humming quietly in the wind along the coast. Radar. The unseen edge. The enemy didn't yet believe it existed, and Dowding intended to keep it that way. 9:45 hours. Chain Home Station, Ventnor, Isle of Wight. Atop the windswept cliffs of the Isle of Wight, another chain home tower loomed, its steel frame glinting in the morning sun. Inside the operations hut, Corporal Elsie Gardner, another young radar operator, sat listening to the steady pulse in her headset. Each sweep of the display was a heartbeat, the pulse of the nation's defense. She turned to her commanding officer. "No new echoes, sir. The skies are clear." He smiled faintly, a rare thing these days. Clear skies. We haven't heard that in weeks. Outside, gulls wheeled over the surf. The channel, once filled with death and smoke, was calm again. Gardner didn't know the details, how the information from her radar fed into the vast, unseen web linking every station, every airfield, every fighter pilot, but she felt it, the sense of belonging to something larger, something that mattered. "Chain Home Ventnor standing by," she said softly into her microphone. "Ready for next contact." The hum continued, "Always ready." 10:10 hours. Biggin Hill Airfield. The Spitfires of 92 Squadron were returning one by one, their wings streaked with oil and cordite, their pilots pale and drenched in sweat. Ground crews rushed forward, waving and shouting directions. Mechanics swarmed the planes before the engines had even cooled, checking bullet holes, refueling, rearming. Flight Lieutenant Alan Wright climbed down from his cockpit, legs unsteady, his hands still shook, not from fear, but from adrenaline that hadn't yet burned off. He removed his oxygen mask, the scent of burned rubber and engine oil thick in his lungs. Kinkham approached, pulling off his gloves. "Good work up there, Alan. You got one confirmed?" Wright nodded. "Heinkel, east of the city. She was on fire before she hit the ground." Kinkham clapped him on the shoulder. "You saved lives today." Wright looked skyward. The clouds were calm now, soft and white against the blue. "Feels like we bought a little more time, doesn't it?" Kinkham followed his gaze. "Aye, but time's what wins wars." 11 o'clock hours. Luftwaffe 2 headquarters, Pas de Calais, France. In a requisitioned chateau near the French coast, General Feldmarschall Albert Kesselring paced furiously. Maps littered the long oak table, dotted with red pins marking English targets: Dover, Portsmouth, London. Behind him, Major Otto Hoot, an intelligence officer, stood nervously. "They knew again," Kesselring snapped, "every time, before our formations even reached the channel." He slammed his fist against the table. "How?" Hoot hesitated. "Some say, they have radio detectors. Perhaps, a new system." "Impossible," Kesselring growled. "No device can see through cloud and distance. Our weathermen say fog covered the coast. And yet their fighters rose perfectly timed. Every time." He turned to the window, looking out toward the grey line of the channel. "Then we'll try again, harder, larger formations." But even as he spoke, doubt crept into his voice. The British weren't guessing, they were watching. 12:45 hours. Dover, England. The radar towers stood silent except for the steady hum of the transmitters. The operators sat slumped in their chairs, sipping tea gone cold hours ago. Peg Williams looked out toward the horizon, where faint smoke trails still lingered above the channel. "Do you think they know?" she asked softly. Collins shook his head. "If they did, they'd have bombed us first." She smiled, tired but proud. "Then let's keep it that way." He nodded. "Aye, we're ghosts in the wires. Peg, the less they see us, the better." Outside, the wind picked up, whistling through the tower frames, a mournful, metallic song. And though no one outside the service knew their names, their work that morning had saved a nation. 1600 hours. The War Cabinet Room, 10 Downing Street. Prime Minister Winston Churchill leaned over the table, cigar smouldering between his fingers. Before him lay the latest report from Fighter Command. Enemy losses, estimated 56 aircraft. RAF losses, 28. London intact. Enemy retreat observed. Churchill smiled faintly. They were met, as always, by our valiant young men. Dowding, sitting opposite, inclined his head respectfully. Indeed they were, Churchill said, puffing slowly on his cigar. But it's what stands behind them that wins the day. This new contraption of yours, radar, what do they call it? Chain home, sir, Dowding replied. Then God bless chain home, Churchill said quietly, and every soul who tends it. The room fell silent except for the scratch of a pen as the Prime Minister signed the day's communiqué. Outside, Big Ben tolled the hour. For the first time in months, it rang over a city still standing. September 16, 1940, 2:15 hours, Chain Home Station, Bawdsey, Suffolk. Night had fallen across England. The sea was black, the horizon invisible, but the airwaves, they were alive. In the dim operations hut at Bawdsey, the birthplace of British radar, a small team worked in silence under the soft hum of their equipment. The room smelled of hot dust and coffee gone cold. The only light came from the cathode ray screens, ghostly green circles pulsing with life. Flight Sergeant Thomas Beckett, a wiry man with oil-stained hands, leaned over the controls, adjusting frequency knobs by touch. Chain home south reporting minor echoes again, could be false returns. He muttered. Lieutenant Joan Carter, one of the WAAF technical officers, leaned closer, eyes narrowing. No, not false. Look, steady bearing, altitude low. Beckett frowned. Low altitude? That's not bombers. No, Carter said softly, that's reconnaissance. The Germans are looking for us. 2:22 hours, Pas de Calais, France. Under the cover of darkness, a specially equipped Junkers Ju-88 took off from an airfield near Saint-Ingever. Its mission was not to bomb, but to listen. Aboard the aircraft sat Oberleutnant Heinrich Vogel, a signals officer from the Luftwaffe's Funkaufklärung radio intelligence unit. His task was to find the source of Britain's mysterious early warnings. For weeks, the Luftwaffe's high command had been baffled. How did the British always seem to intercept their raids with uncanny precision? Some suspected spies, others guessed weather balloons or secret observers on the French coast. But Vogel had another theory, a terrifying one. Radio reflections, he wrote in his report. Long-wave signals bouncing from our aircraft. Some kind of detection network. Now he was here to prove it. As the Ju-88 crossed the channel, his instruments picked up faint rhythmic pulses. Ping, 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 invisible. Methodical, stretching from the English coast. He turned to his crew. There, record that. That's their eye. But he didn't know, even as he traced the signal, that the British were already watching him. 2:30 hours, Chain home Bawdsey. Beckett's radar hummed, the green trace brightening slightly. There, that's it again, single aircraft, low altitude, crossing from France. Carter turned to the communications desk. Alert fighter command, possible recon flight, bearing 090. Minutes later, 2 Hurricanes from No. 242 Squadron lifted off from Coltishall, their engines tearing through the night sky. Radar tracked them every step of the way. In London, the filter room updated the plot. The voice from Bawdsey came through clear. Enemy aircraft turning south, possible transmission detected. Dowding, awakened from his bunk at Bentley Priory, walked briskly into the room in his robe. They're searching for Chain home, he said simply. Let's see how blind they are when they think they've found it. He knew something the Germans didn't. The radar stations were built tough, and built to deceive. Each site had dummy towers, false huts, decoy generators. If bombed, repairs could be made in hours. Chain home was not one line of defense. It was a net. And that night, as the Ju-88 flew over the dark waters, the net tightened. 2:45 hours, over the channel. Vogel looked at his receiver. The rhythmic pulses were growing stronger. Closer, he whispered. We're almost. Tracer fire erupted from below. Flak, they see us, the pilot shouted. Banking hard left. Vogel's instruments toppled, charts scattering across the cabin. He saw the coastline flash below, the dark outlines of towers faintly visible in the moonlight. Then came the searchlights, beams slicing the sky apart, converging on the Ju-88. Dive. The bomber plummeted toward the sea. Rounds ripped through the fuselage. Vogel's headphones filled with static, the same pulse that had guided him moments before now drowned by chaos. A final flash of light. The sea rushed upward. The Ju-88 hit the channel and vanished beneath the waves. 3:30 hours, Dover, England. In the radar hut, Peg Williams sat staring at her console, watching the faint echoes fade. One downed over the channel, came the voice from Uxbridge. Confirmed by Coastal Defence. Peg removed her headset, rubbing her tired eyes. Poor devils, she murmured, didn't even know what they were flying into. Collins poured her another cup of lukewarm tea. Maybe next time, they'll stay home. She smiled faintly, maybe. But she knew better, the war in the air was far from over. And this invisible war of signals and silence, was only beginning. 6 o'clock hours, Bentley Priory, later that morning. Dowding stood by the window, watching the grey dawn spread across London. Below, the city was stirring, buses moving, milkmen on their rounds, children walking to school as if the world hadn't nearly ended yesterday. He turned to Park, who was reviewing the latest reports. They tried to find it last night. Park said, we picked them up the moment they left France. Dowding nodded. And they failed? Park smiled thinly, utterly. Dowding took a slow breath, lighting his pipe. Then Britain still stands. He exhaled a plume of smoke toward the morning sky. And as long as that hum continues on the coast, we'll always see them coming. The faint drone of a Merlin engine echoed in the distance, the sound of a patrol returning from dawn watch. Dowding listened, eyes distant. The men fight with guns and courage, he said softly, but it's the girls with the headphones who give him the chance to fight it all. He turned to Park, never forget that. Outside, the radar towers stood tall against the morning light, their metal frames gleaming like silver bones of some ancient guardian. The unseen wall held, for now. And with it, so did Britain. September 17, 1940, 7:45 hours, Chain Home Station, Poling, Sussex. Mist rolled across the Sussex coast, soft and grey, wrapping itself around the massive steel towers like a shroud. From a distance, they looked otherworldly, four thin giants watching the channel, silent and patient. Inside the operations hut, the morning shift had just begun. The air smelled of damp paper and soldered metal. The operators were weary but alert. Every day began this way now. Every sunrise might bring another attack. Leading aircraft woman Nora Bennett adjusted her headphones, listening to the quiet, rhythmic pulses of the radar beams sweeping out toward France. A soft ping, ping, ping echoed in her ears, the steady heartbeat of Britain's defense. Contact bearing 160, range 90 miles, she called out calmly. Single formation, low altitude, closing fast. Her sergeant, William Rooke, looked up sharply. Report it. The message shot through the underground network, from Poling to fighter command to the airfield still shrouded in morning mist. Within minutes, the calm of dawn shattered as the wail of scramble sirens rolled across southern England. The Chain Home Towers had spoken again. 7:55 hours, RAF Tangmere, West Sussex. Engines roared to life on the airfield. Mechanics shouted over the noise, pushing starter trolleys away as the first Hurricanes of No. 43 Squadron taxied into position. Squadron leader Peter Townsend, a lean man with sharp eyes, tightened his harness and glanced up at the sky. Same time as yesterday, he muttered into his mask. They never learn. Vector 155, came the controller's voice through the radio. Raid approaching the coast. You're cleared to intercept. Townsend gave a brief nod to his wingman. Let's go hunting. Moments later, the Hurricanes tore into the sky, climbing through mist into sunlight. Their propellers slicing the air in perfect rhythm. 8-10 hours, above the channel. The morning haze burned away, revealing a sight Townsend had come to know too well, the long, silver line of Dornier bombers, flanked by darting Messerschmitt 109s. Bandits in sight, he called. Angels 12, form on me. The Hurricanes banked, sunlight glinting off their wings. And just as the Germans began to adjust their course, the Spitfires arrived. From higher altitude, 92 Squadron dove in, their Merlin engines screaming like banshees. Hit the bombers, Kincombe's voice rang through the radio. Leave the 109s to us. The air erupted in chaos once more, tracer rounds flashing like lightning across the sky. Townsend's Hurricane shook as he dove through the formation. He squeezed the trigger, short bursts. One Dornier's engine exploded in a burst of orange flame. Scratch one, he breathed. Behind him, two Messerschmitts dropped in from above. He rolled hard, black smoke trailing past his canopy. Christ, they're persistent, he hissed. But even as the sky filled with danger, a calm voice echoed in his ear. Townsend, Poling reports secondary raid forming further east. You're clear to disengage if necessary. He smiled grimly. The radar saw what the eye could not. Copy that. Control, tell them thank you, again. 8:20 hours, Fighter Command Headquarters, Bentley Priory. The filter room was alive once more, the great map table alive with movement. WAAF plotters shifted markers, calling out bearings and altitudes in rapid sequence. Primary raid engaged, secondary forming off La Touquet. Park's finger traced the coastline. Tangmir's on 'em already, send Northolt to cover the eastern approach. Dowding stood behind him, silent, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke. They still don't understand how we see them coming. Park nodded, a tired smile flickering, and I don't intend to enlighten them. The two men watched as the red markers stalled, then turned, retreating toward France. For the third morning in a row, the Luftwaffe had been repelled before reaching London. Dowding exhaled slowly. It's holding, Keith, God help me, it's actually holding. 9:05 hours, Luftflotte 2 headquarters, France. Generalfeldmarschall Kesselring slammed his fist against the map table, scattering his coffee across the reports. 3 days, he shouted. 3 days in a row they rise before we cross the channel. His staff remained silent, none dared mention what was becoming obvious. Their radar, muttered Vogel's replacement, Hauptmann Müller, under his breath, they can see us. Kesselring froze. Radar? Some say it's impossible. Müller swallowed hard. With respect, Herr Feldmarschall, it's not. Kesselring stared out the window toward the grey sea. Then we must destroy it. But even as he spoke, his own intelligence briefings told a bitter truth. Chain home sites were everywhere. From the Isle of Wight to Norfolk, from Dover to the Clyde, a lattice of towers and transmitters. Each feeding fighter command the gift of foresight. Bombing one would change nothing. Britain's wall of sound could not be blinded. 11:40 hours, chain home Dover. Peg Williams watched the radar screen flicker faintly. The echoes were fading. She stretched her neck, listening to the faint buzz of the transmitters outside the hut. Collins entered, carrying a clipboard. Confirmed, all raids turned back. No losses reported from Tangmere. Peg smiled weakly. Another victory no one will ever hear about. He chuckled. That's the point, Peg, we're not meant to be seen. She turned back to the screen. The soft hum of the radar filled the silence again. And in that sound, that steady pulse, she heard something else, the heartbeat of the nation. Invisible, tireless, unbroken. 1400 hours, House of Commons, London. That afternoon, Prime Minister Churchill stood before Parliament. His voice, heavy but resolute, carried across the chamber. Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. The chamber erupted in applause. But as the cheers filled the air, few understood that among the few were not only the pilots, but the unseen network that guided them. The women in the radar huts. The operators in the filter rooms. The engineers who kept the hum alive through blackouts and bombings. Their names would not make headlines. Their stories would not be told for decades. But they had given Britain eyes in the dark, and that had changed everything. September 18, 1940, night, Dover. The radar towers stood silhouetted against a star-filled sky. The sea below was calm, reflecting the faint red light of the transmitters. Inside the hut, Peg sat with her tea, eyes on the screen. A faint pulse swept around again and again, tracing the horizon. No raids tonight, no echoes of war. For the first time in months, the channel was silent. She removed her headphones and listened to the gentle hum of the machine. The same hum that had saved her country. The unseen wall still stood, built not of stone or steel, but of waves and will. And in that long, dark summer of 1940, it had turned the tide of history. Because in the Battle of Britain, the first victory was won not in the skies, but in the silence before them.